T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Low Gravity, a podcast on startups, the tech hustle, and shared mobility. Today, we're joined by Juan Camilo Gomez. I met Juan Camilo recently. I met you recently through a mutual contact at Here Mobility. Jonathan, who was actually also on the podcast recently as well. And we had met in Medellin with our other partner Jairo and hit it off really well. It's obvious, Juan Camilo, that you are extremely knowledgeable about mobility and sustainability and everything like that. So maybe introduce yourself and give a little bit of background.
Okay, thanks again for having me in this amazing space. And well, just to talk about mobility, that's what I really love. So, to talk about me, let's say that for almost the last 14, 15 years, I've been working about mobility and especially sustainability related to urban areas, to cities, especially to transformation, especially in the cities in terms of sustainability. And at the beginning, I was like the former coordinator of sustainable mobility of the Metro de Medellin. This is the only metro company in Colombia, and well, I was in charge of all the different infrastructure projects like massive transportation systems in metro, like cable cars, like tramways, like BRT systems. And at the end of that was like almost 10 years, we started to talk about micromobility, especially the share biking models, the share bicycle public models in cities, and especially how what that's going to affect these massive transportation systems in the first and the last mile. So, and after that, I just went to the municipality of Medellin, like the we can say like the general manager for sustainable mobility for whole the city, and I was in charge for almost 3 years in the direction, creation, and development of different proposals for sustainable mobility for the city, from the massive transportation system, the medium capacity system, and also the micromobility, the walkability, and all these kind of pedestrians and different issues that now are coming to us.
Yeah,
So
so really interesting. You were, and we'll get to the rest of your story in a second. But you were basically in the center of government at the time that the big pop of micromobility happened. Because as you said, like micromobility is not necessarily a new concept; it's
yeah,
just a hot concept right now.
yeah.
So what was the feedback of government and your peers at the time? You know, until now, transit has been exclusively public transit. It's always been these large RFPs from government, and now all of a sudden, these trailblazers, Silicon Valley guys are coming in. What was the reaction at the time
Well,
from the
well,
inside?
I think that it's been difficult because normally from the public sector is very traditional the way that you look at the transportation solutions. So normally, when you are on the public sector, you want to be the owner of the solutions. Normally, you want to be the owner of the solutions. You want to be the one, the main investor. You want to be hold the laws, hold the regulatory and mandatory issues
Yeah,
just in your hands. And now that this kind of different things that this party inventors, this kind of guys that just raise their hand and say, hey, I have a new solution. I don't depend from the government. I don't depend from the public special issues. So if you are able to pay for your mobility, for your transportation, we are open. And that changed a lot because I can say that when I was on the public sector, we were not even prepared to understand this kind of new micromobility that was coming to the cities, especially that was coming from the United States, from
yeah.
Europe, and now to Latin America, and especially Colombia.
And it happened at such a high speed as well. Like normally private partnerships and public sector takes so long for anything to happen, and I being in the center of it, as cosmic, at the beginning of the boom in Latin America and specifically in Colombia, from the outside in, because obviously you're talking from the
Yeah.
opposite perspective, we had never seen any regulations move that fast. Even when they were talking about cryptocurrencies, even when they were talking about other really high impact or things that needed to get regulation, nothing moved as fast as micromobility in terms of regulation.
Yeah, I think that something happens in, let's say, in the 5 6 years just before the beginning of this new movement of the micromobility. I think that, for example, developments like Uber, like Cabify, like the now the traditional B2C concept, the street hail, this private hire, just changed the way that the governments started to understand this kind of private mobility. So that give all the public sector like the intention to, hey, we need to prepare for that. And
Yeah.
once the micromobility came, well, at least in this kind of street hail, were something more clear. And now, especially to micromobility, that affects especially the public space, that is the main issue, I think, all over the world, not especially in Latin America, but in Latin America is more difficult because the public space is not well organized. So when
Yeah.
you found, I don't know, a solution like this in the public space, just beside, I don't know, the guy that is selling some specific food, for example, it just gets crazy because
Yeah.
it's a lot of people, a lot of things just around. And I think that was like preparation for that coming from the street hail platforms like Uber, like Cabify, like Lyft, like this kind of things that um, just give us a message of what's going to happen in the future.
This is a good segue into ride hailing and stuff like that, because I love the story. Maybe it's just because I'm a cowboy myself, but I love the Uber story in Colombia. It's so fun. They exited. They got a lot of pressure from the unions. They got a lot of pressure from government. They exited Colombia, and then they came back less than a month later and
Yeah,
rewrote their contract. Talk a little bit about that. It's a really good
yeah,
story.
yeah. That was really funny, and we can say that it's funny because it is, because they just create like a huge drama all around the country. If you was going to hire a car, a message appear telling you, hey guys, we're gonna miss you, we are leaving Colombia. With all the publicity in the government, in television, they just say, hey, we are very sad, we are gonna miss Colombia. And just a month after, they came with a new proposal, totally legal, because it's legal.
It is,
It's Yeah, it is.
according to the law.
Yeah,
It's literally, yeah.
according to the local law, it is total legally. And now, for example, the other actors like the traditional taxi companies, they are like, what happened here?
They don't know how to
So
respond. Yeah.
yeah, and the government doesn't know what to say because it's totally legal what they are doing. And that was like like I said, a super funny strategy, and I think super intelligent strategy, just to create like a huge
Huge buzz, huge attention.
yeah, huge attention, and a super marketing strategy. And now they are conquering again the market. So
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
it's
What
crazy.
what they
And
did, let me just tell
yeah,
everyone who's listening what they did. So they exited the market. They made announcements like Juan Camilo is saying, and the law was structured in a way that said taxis is essentially a public service and therefore it has to be regulated as such. Uber came back. I think they took 20 days to just rewrite their contract. And when you're using an Uber, you're renting a car that comes with a free driver. So you're no longer using a transportation method, you're renting a vehicle, and then that vehicle comes with a free driver. And I think it's such a funny way
yeah,
to put it, and such a like middle finger to the
yeah, but I think that, as like I was talking at the beginning, like 5 years ago, they just came with this new idea of the private hire, the street hailing, and now they get again in the innovation loop. They understood that, okay, guys, we need to adapt, we need to stay in different countries, and I think that what they are doing right now in Colombia, they are going to replicate in every city that they already are working
Yeah.
on the world. So it's interesting because Colombia is like I said
It's
it's
like a
like a funny
pioneer.
laboratory. It's like
Yeah.
a funny laboratory, but it's a pioneer. And I think I always, when I was in the municipality in charge of how the mobility issues, and I was the authority, I always was saying to the mayor, we need to change. It's not about to stop Uber. It's about to change the way that we are moving, and I think that we need to be more flexible with the traditional transportation systems and let them even get open to new opportunities. So I think it's really interesting right now what is happening.
I agree. I think it's also perfect timing. I mean, it's hard to ignore. We're doing this remotely because we're both in quarantine right now, so we have to kind of address that more and more and more. It's becoming very evident that the gig economy, that crowdsourced vehicles, crowdsourced ride hailing, the shared economy, all of these themes are becoming more important because now that people are losing their jobs, they're looking to alternative sources of income. And when you guys were talking about mobility and how it played into civil planning and urban planning, did the concept of, this is actually a fuel for stimulating the local economy come up, or was that less important?
No, I think it is. Even I can tell because my study for my last master degree was dedicated to micromobility, especially the non-motorized ones. So like walkability, like bicycle, and the interesting thing, especially for example in Colombia and Latin America, was that in urban planning, no one was talking about this kind of solution, this kind of approach to new markets. And what's very interesting because what people is always looking is the solution from one origin to one destination. And when you can find that in a simple way or even in a connected way, for example, a metro plus a bicycle plus a scooter plus a good network just for pedestrians, this becomes into a new development and even not only urban economical development because just around this kind of urban development appears new stores, appears
Yeah.
new activities, appears new behaviors.
Offices.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and that's the interesting part because normally here in Colombia and Latin America, the basic issue about to think the city, to talk about urban planning was always okay. Massive transportation system that costs a lot. Planning for cars, so that means more space for highways. That means a lot of money as well, and also housing. But when you have all this combined, that first, for example, comes the housing, then the highways, then the massive transportation system, the solution is never concrete. So when you are capable to combine, for example, a short solution proposal like a micromobility with a short solution proposal in terms of a space. For example, micromobility doesn't need the same space of a highway related
Yeah.
to cars. So if you are able to create that with a new housing development in the city, you will have all the solutions in related to mobility for these new people that is coming to the specific space, and you will not have like I don't know, a delay of 5-10 years in terms of mobility, in terms of develop a massive transportation system or a super infrastructure related to cars. So this is very interesting because the economy starts immediately. They start immediately. They don't need to wait for the new highway, for the new massive transportation system.
What is the solution to that? Because this is spoken about so much in shared mobility and micromobility. How do you actually take government funded or private partner, public private partnership, and then integrate it into the same system? From a technical capacity, obviously, I understand it, but typically the problem is bureaucracy or industry. How do you dance around that topic? What do you actually do?
Well, I think that right now, and I can say how the world in the last, let's say, 5 maximum 10 years, they are just understanding that what happens, I don't know, 50 years ago, this kind of PPP projects, these public, private public projects, can be done with some specific issues related with some clear specifications. And now they are understanding that, for example, you can create like integration in fares, integrations in operativity, and also integration in terms of space. For example, we can say that here with Metro de Medellin, that is the main company with almost, let's say, 60 stations all over the territory, with almost 4 million people living in there. So that means that now they are open, for example, to bring a space for bicycles, for bring a space for scooters, bring a space for cars, but not only the space. The interesting part is that they are now open just to integrate the different fares related to the final ride. So, for example, if you want to go by metro, your entire trip from the from the north to the south of the city, but the first stage of your ride is at least, I don't know, 2 kilometers by walking. Now you can do it in a bicycle, in a scooter,
Mhm.
but even that fare is that doesn't mean that it's your own scooter, your own bicycle. That means that with this interesting new development of the floating mobility, the dogless mobility. Now you can find a scooter just, I don't know, 3 steps away from your door, from your
Mhm.
house, and you can pay in the same application. That's where the, I think the other interesting part to resolve that answer is not only the public private actuations, is the technology itself that is just shortening the space between the inequity of the different transportation systems. That means that if you are able to integrate in the same app, in the same payment method, this kind of solution like bikes, like the scooters, like, I don't know, whatever you want, with the massive transportation system, you are giving the person the total solution from the origin, from the to the destination that I was just talking about a few minutes ago.
And theoretically, you can give better and more efficient pricing as well because you're bulking. You're taking multiple modes of transportation, but you're putting it into the same trip. Ultimately, it is point A to point B with little micro point A's and point B's in between.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that that takes us to the specific issue that is multimodality. Multimodality, I think that this is still the one of the bases of the sustainability all around the world. But multimodality must be seen in all different specific issues related, for example, in operation issues, in fare issues, even in space issues. If multimodality is just understood like that, I think that we just can shorten the space between all these kind of solutions, just to give all the cities, to give all the different populations a real solution of mobility that must be totally aligned with the style of life.
what do you think is blocking that right now? Because in theory, multimodality is obviously the best case scenario. It means you get to configure the
Mhm.
vehicles and the rental types according to the markets. But what's preventing that? I mean, it's easier said than done. So why is
Mhm.
there a struggle getting this to market? Because
So,
many huge companies are working on this, and many governments are as well. But it still has yet to reach the public.
no, I think that it is still in hands of the public sector. I think that is more related to bureaucracy, that we are just passing from the, I don't know, from the traditional planners that used to think that mobility is just highways, are
Hmm.
just this kind of infrastructure, and even that the, for example, infrastructure is synonym of development. I think that now we are changing that. Our new planners, our new mayors, our new governors are just changing the way that they understand the city. But at least I think that will take, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years to have a
Yeah.
total change, and let the bureaucracy just behind and integrate totally all this kind of bureaucracy and more related to the different solutions of mobility. But right now, I think that it's totally in hands of the public sector, and that they need to understand what is the role, the paper that micromobility, for example, of this new kind of mobility as a services play in the cities.
I think it's a really good point. For a very long time, at least in Western culture, because the economy and capitalism revolved around loans, specifically mortgages, for a long time, cities were planned based on housing complexes, and in Spanish we call them conjuntos. I think, right, like
Sí.
these
Yeah.
private private environments, or gated communities, or developments that you see many times when you're driving down on the U.S. highways and freeways, and space is just becoming limited, especially in metropolitan cities. So the more vertical we become and the more we try to maximize space and efficiency and ultimately sustainability, I think the changing of the guards and all of the topics being spoken about at
Mhm.
the same time, it's kind of the perfect time for all of this to take place. So you started your career in mobility and with the ambitions of hopefully planning a more sustainable world about 10 years ago. It's obvious that you're very passionate, and one would even say obsessed about this topic. When you started 10 years ago, did you imagine yourself having these types of conversations? Did you see this kind of weird futuristic world, or were you thinking more traditionally?
No, I can say that was more in the traditional specific criteria. Well, I can say that 10 years ago I was thinking only on the traditional
Mm.
transportation theory of, say, all the cities in the world and the main urban areas need massive transportation system. Is, well, we can say is very, very expensive, but in long term it could be cheaper for people. But now I can think, I can say that especially the world is changing very fast now. The innovation process is happening in just hours, in days, and not like 10 years ago, that if you have an idea and you want to create something, you have like a specific path by path just to go
Hmm.
through the new idea, the new innovation, the articulation. And now the technology just allow us to have an entire toolkit to develop ideas, to develop solutions.
Hmm.
Even you can find money on the internet. For example, if you have a good idea, you have a good deck, a good speech, and you find the correct person, you can find money even for this kind of ideas. So I think that eventually that was changing just during the years. And I can say that, for example, in 3 years ago, I wasn't expecting micromobility as a
Yeah.
solution, for example, in the main cities of the world. I was thinking maybe in that moment that this kind of bicycle share systems, public systems, were the solution, but they still were playing the same role of the
Yeah,
massive
which was
transportation system.
partnerships and
You must say,
RFPs and
yeah,
the whole song and dance, definitely.
yeah, yeah. But 3 years ago, I can say I wasn't even thinking about that micromobility, that solutions like the scooters, like the
Mhm.
one-wheel solutions, electric solutions could appear. And for example, in my experience, I was in South Korea in 2015 and 2016. And that was the first time. South Korea is
Mhm.
always like in the future, in architecture, in solution, in everything. And that was the first time I could see one wheel electric vehicle
It's
just
kind of
going
fun.
around the
It's kind of funny to
city.
see,
and,
right?
and, and yeah, and one guy just over him and just going through the people. And what's crazy, because it's
It's the
2015.
future.
Yeah, this is the future. But when is this going to happen in Latin America? And let's say just the last year that was coming to us, especially in a specific solutions. But now I think that we are more prepared just to receive these kind of things. And maybe the next year we will find another solution, another specific development. And maybe right now that development, for example, now in times of this COVID-19, people is thinking, is innovating about something different just to about or just to promote the
Yeah.
social distancing, for example. How would you be prepared to travel again in a massive transportation system if all the world is insisting in social
It's
distancing? So
crazy
I
because you
think
see
that
these
that's
videos like Japan, even before all of this, was always squishing people in. But I mean, Transmilenio, which is the system in Bogota, and Metro, is it's nerve wracking. We had someone come and clean the office, and it was obvious that she wasn't very trained. She didn't really understand why this was so serious. So we gave her gloves, we gave her a mask, and she went back on the public transit. But more and more, this is going to be the narrative, which is get individual vehicles, have more space, social distancing, etc.
this is not only going to be related to mobility. I think that in the future is not only going to be the solution, the hardware itself, like the scooter. I think that in the future is going to be like a super app in your cell phone, in your pocket, just to let you do all that you really need in the city. For example, in the same app, in the same market, that you can just have a coffee, send it to your home, to your office, or that you can rent a scooter that, I don't know, with the CO2 avoided, riding the scooter, you can have like a specific coins, I don't know, like environmental coins, just to enjoy a coffee on a Starbucks later that day, or even that from the same application you can just start a ride on a scooter, then just start the car or the sharing car that you will need, just to start immediately your second part of the trip, of the ride, and get, I don't know, to a long distance. I think that is more related to how technology is going to shorten the distance between different needs in the city and the daily life. Maybe that's
Yeah,
something
that is
interesting
very
to talk
interesting.
about.
Juan Camilo, thank you so much for your time. I know you're really busy, especially now. So many calls and everything from the house. It was great talking to you,
Okay.
and I'm looking forward to speaking more. Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure for me. Thank you. Thank you.
If you're interested in launching your own shared mobility fleet, go to www.cosmicgo.co.